Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. And I want to welcome everyone to the Commission for Historic and Agricultural Preservation on this date, August 9th, 2022. I call this meeting to order at 1:04 p.m. Before we begin, are there any absences today? Sarah, okay.
It's like me. And Mayra has not been sworn in by the mayor yet.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So we do have a quorum.
Yes, yes, sir.
Thank you. So I would now like to introduce myself, and then after I introduce myself, I'll allow the rest of the commissioners and the CHAP staff to introduce themselves. My name is Harry Spikes. I am the Commissioner Chairman for Historical and Agricultural Preservation. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all for the commissioners for being here as well.
Eric Holcomb, Executive Director of CHAP.
Kapowlin, Commissioner.
Garrett Power, Commissioner.
Nicole Battle, Commissioner representing nonprofit developers.
Good afternoon, John Bullock, City Council Representative for the Commission.
Jill Dennis, Commissioner.
Hi, everybody. Kate Edwards, DHCD representative on the commission.
Good afternoon. Gary Rodwell, representing the Coppin Heights CDC, Baltimore Heritage, and the preservation community in the city.
Catherine Good, Commissioner.
Peter Morrill, Commissioner, representing Preservation Maryland.
Ann Powell, representing Greater Baltimore Committee.
Stacy Montgomery, CHAP staff.
Tyreek Charlouse, CHAP staff.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Eddie Leon, CHAP staff. Anthony Stewart, CHAP staff.
Lauren Chiswick, CHAP staff.
Thank you, and thank you for all who are in the audience and in attendance with us today. Thank you. So I'm going to begin with giving all of you the mission and just some preliminary information I want to share with all of us before we start, and then we're going to go right into our agenda. The CHAP mission is to enhance and promote the culture and economy of Baltimore through the preservation of buildings, structures, sites, and neighborhoods that have aesthetic, historic, and agricultural value. The goals of CHAP include preserving historic agricultural, architecture and monuments, reclaiming broken neighborhoods, preventing demolition by neglect, and integrating our city's past into its future. We have a few housekeeping items. We have a copy of the agenda outside. If you would like to speak, we have a sign-in sheet outside. If you've not signed the sheet, please feel free to sign the form. Depending on the number of individuals who would like to speak, we usually give 2 to 4 minutes. And when people do speak, my 3-minute warning is usually this. So I don't hit the gavel, I just raise it. But once you see that, you've got about a minute left. And then I will give you 30 seconds to let you know that you're about to reach your time. When you're called to speak, please give your first and your last name so that we may be able to enter it into the record. Minutes, what I would like to do, I would like to get into, before we get into the minutes, get into our due process and review procedures. CHAP reviews applications in conjunction with the building permit process or the permit section of the Department of Housing and Community Development. If a building permit application is filed prior to historic design review, the application is placed on hold pending completion of the CHAP review process. The review process is completed by issuing an authorization to proceed. The historic design review process is in addition to other applicable laws and regulations and does not diminish the force of urban renewal plans, building codes, zone codes, etc. It is the applicant's responsibility to comply with all applicable laws, regulations, and codes. Proposed projects are reviewed prior to issuing a building permit. Applications must comply with the Baltimore City Historic Preservation Design Guidelines in planning and executing their projects. During review, considers the proposed work, taking into consideration the historical and agricultural character of the structure and of the immediate area. Applicants will need to clearly explain how their project complies with the design guidelines. For minor projects, in order to expedite the application process, the Commission has delegated review authority to the Executive Director for cases involving minor work. Minor projects must not significantly change the overall appearance or remove the significant undamaged historic fabric. Major projects. Major projects may change the overall character, appearance, and integrity of the structure. Substantial building alterations, demolitions, additions, and new constructions are considered major projects and are reviewed at a public hearing. Interested parties should request a pre-development meeting in the planning department to begin the review process. An electronic version of all materials must be submitted to the CHAP staff at least 25 calendar days prior to the public hearing date. If the application is complete, the project will be scheduled for a public hearing. CHAP hearings. At the public hearing, CHAP staff presents recommendations to the commission regarding the project. Following the staff presentation, the applicant may make a presentation to the commission. Interested parties, including neighborhood associations, have the opportunity to provide public testimony. Following testimony, the commission renders a decision on the application at the public hearing. Persons aggrieved by the decision of the commission may seek judicial and appellate review in accordance with Baltimore City Code. After an authorization proceed is issued, the applicant may obtain a building permit. The commission's process is impartial, and staff comments are evidence that assist the commission in rendering decisions. Now, we can move on to our agenda. We have a consent agenda, and what I would like to do is ask the commissioners, are there any questions regarding the items on the consent agenda? Okay. Yes, ma'am. If there are none, I would like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much. We will now move to our regular agenda. You will see in our regular agenda, we have 6108 Maywood Avenue, Mount Washington Historic District. And the request is a reconsideration of proposal to construct a front porch based on new information. The applicant, and please forgive me if I ever say your first name and your last name wrong. Applicant is Scott Bloomberg, and the staff who will be presenting for us today is Mr. Eddie Eon. Thank you, Eddie.
Commissioner, do
Yes.
we need to do approval of last month's minutes? first?
Yes, we do, please. Thank you so much. I'd like to make a motion. Can we approve the meeting minutes for the last meeting that we had last month?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Commissioner Good, thank you. Back to 6108. Eddie, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. We have a request to reconsider the proposal to construct a front porch based on new information. The address is 6108 Maywood Avenue in the Mount Washington Historic District. Scott Bloomberg is the owner, and Laura Melville Thomas of Melville Thomas Architects is the project architect. We have the property here located in the top portion of the Mount Washington Historic District, which is also known as Dixon's Hill. The property did come before the CHAP Commission previously for a review in 2021 to review considerable rehabilitation, construction of a new garage. The previous commission reviewed and followed the recommendations. One of the recommendations was at the time disapproval of the front porch based upon the available historic information on the site. And finally, in June of 2021, the commission finalized the approval of the project remaining. The applicants withdrew the porch reconsideration at that time. The building in question is this one. This is an older pre-rehabilitation photograph. As you see, it has a stone front porch and steps and a considerable portico element to the entry of the front. And it's a perfect example in the Dixon's Hill Historic District of this type of architecture. The applicants, during the course of renovations, discovered a historic photograph which included evidence of wood railing rather than a stone wall that was on the porch. So with that historic information, we did authorize a change to their plans that included the installation of a railing in the plans. But during the course of further renovation work, it was discovered when they removed the deteriorated cedar shingles siding that there was evidence of an actual whole porch roof that had been located on the site and covered over the front porch. Here at the site, there's outlines between the first and second floor where the framing was, shadow marks. There's a newer porch on the side that's been being rehabilitated as well. This is a historic photograph showing the railing that had been there previously before the stone wall was used and created to enclose the porch.
Eddie, do we know the date of that photograph?
It's the 1920s.
Okay, thank you.
All the historic maps and information that we had uncovered previously in 2021 never indicated there was a historic porch on the site. So until this evidence came to light, it's been always assumed that the portico was as near original as possible. So, but as you see, we see shadow marks of the angles of the roof and the framing that have been put over top of the siding and had marked it up. And I investigated the site and also discovered that the entry was actually much larger than it is now. So the portico and the front door entry are of a later, probably turn of the 20th century renovation work that occurred. The personal speculation is that perhaps the columns were the ones that were originally used on the original porch. And it's possible that they were just relocated to create this more dramatic portico. So the applicants are proposing to restore the original architectural feature of the roof over the front porch. The column entrance that is there now will be retained and preserved, and they will incorporate it, the previously improved railing and balusters surrounding the porch. We applied CHAP guidelines, Chapter 1 and 1.9.1 porches. This is the applicant's proposal for the porch roof cover. The columns are intended to be as large and as massive as the portico ones, so they do appear proportionally appropriate to the design and to the architecture of the house. And the railings, of course, will be wood. All the work currently on the rehabilitation is high quality work to a historic building, and looking at the design and comparing it to others in the community, it is appropriate for this period of house. The neighborhood had previously met and approved the front porch roof, so they are in agreement that it's appropriate for the building. Applicants have discovered definitive proof that the original front elevation had a front porch with a roof, columns, and a wood handrail. The proposed porch design complements and restores the original form and a major feature to the front elevation that is readily seen in surrounding facades of houses built at the same time. The current portico was not original to the house, however, its own right gained historic significance to the facade. It will remain and be incorporated into the design of the new porch. The design of the new porch with large columns complements the heavy Gothic columns of the portico. Recommendation: staff recommends approval of the porch design and incorporation of the historic portico. Thank you.
Eddie, thank you. At this point, I'd like to give the commissioners an opportunity to ask Eddie any questions. Any questions for Eddie?
I have one
Yes.
I know that, Mike, I know that there was a lot of previous work, so thank you for the history of various approvals and everything. Given the uncovering of the shadow lines and the original siding, taking off the shakes, has there been any discussion about not putting back on shingle shakes, or is that still the intention?
We can ask the applicant. Right now, they currently have proposed to put a hardy panel with a shake design over top. However, maybe after, if the commissioners wish to recommend, perhaps they will consider that.
Quick question.
Yes.
The use of standing seam, is that, I mean, wouldn't that typically, that historically would have wood shingles on the roof as opposed to?
Yes, it most likely could have had that. However, I think there are other examples in the neighborhood where the standing seam had been used, and their current reconstruction of the side porch has a standing seam roof. So
I
this-
agree that for the age of the structure, that standing seam is
Out of character.
a typical characteristic.
Any other questions for Eddie, Commissioners? Okay. At this point, we have two individuals who would like to come up. We have you on the list to testify. The first I'd like to bring up is Scott Boomberg.
So I don't really have too much to add, but I wanted to be here for questions. I can't speak to the question about the shingle. I have a picture that I'd be happy to pass around. The shingle is already mostly up. The area that Eddie was showing where there was the historical evidence of the porch that has remained, but around the rest of the house, the shingle is mostly up and is continuing to go up as we speak.
Can you introduce yourself really quick?
Oh, sorry. I'm Scott Bloomberg. My wife and I are the owners of the home.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Scott?
Okay, so just for clarification, sorry, I can't try to look at you and the mic at the same time. So the shingling is coming back around the entire front. That's the intention.
Would you like to see? I mean, I took a picture.
No, I was just curious in light of this discovery, because also, up farther in the center, there's clearly some, indication of former decoration or anything. Now, there have been a lot of changes to the house throughout the course of history, so you can always sit there and ask, well, when was what done? And unless you have, can dig up photos, it's hard to know that. So I was just wondering.
Right. The only photo we have of a historic nature is that one that Eddie showed from approximately the 1920s and already had some shingle on there. The decorative feature you mentioned at the center, we don't know. We'd love to know what it was, but we have no idea.
Any other questions? Is there anything else you'd like to share with us, Scott?
Not if you don't have any questions, no.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
I think the second person who was going to testify.
That's fine. I was about to introduce them right now.
Oh,
Are they going to? The next person.
It's our builder. He was here for support, so I don't know if he.
Okay.
If you guys have questions.
So on our list, we have a Sean Saffron. Sean, are you here? Yeah. Come right on up. I didn't want to pronounce your last name wrong. You can say your whole name for us.
You got it right. So it's Sean Saffron.
Thank you.
The project manager, worked for Smith House Construction. So we've been renovating the house since October, and Scott and Rebecca Melville Thomas are very involved with the project, and we're looking to wrap up October 1 and the client moving in by then. So just if there's any construction related questions, I'd be happy to ask or answer those. The front porch, I will say, has always been Rebecca's like dream on that house since day one. And we were enthusiastic when we pulled off the old shake that they probably put up in the 20s and saw that roof line. It was a text message to Rebecca, like, look at this. So it was a day for applause. So.
I do have a question that you might be able to answer. I did not see it in any of the staff information. Can you flip back to one of the elevations, the side elevation of the porch? For the drawing. Sorry. Do you have the side one?
No, they're
Oh,
in the
okay.
staff report.
Okay, that's fine. All right. So my question is, because the idea is that I want to make sure I'm understanding, right? That the existing entry with the columns and the dentals are basically going to stay in place below the porch ceiling, or is the roof set high enough that those all remain below the porch ceiling, or is it somehow getting how is the top of this going to interact with where the ceiling of the porch is basically my question. Is it the ceiling above it? Is it tall enough that the ceiling's all above it?
Correct. Right.
Okay. Just because there wasn't a section, so I was just kind of interpreting. So all of the ceiling of the porch is going to be above this, so this all stays intact.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions for Sean? Sean, you have anything else for us? Thank you for presenting. Appreciate you.
Great.
Thank you. Eddie, I'm sorry, Peter. You have a question, Peter?
Not a question. I was just getting more into discussion, so I can wait.
By all means, go ahead.
Okay. So overall, I think the plans look good. I think the concern I have about it is kind of creating this sort of fairy tale of what we have. So we've got a very Victorian house that had a very Victorian porch at some point. And then someone made a very conscious decision, turn of the century, to get rid of the Victorian bits and make it look like a colonial revival with the shingles and the new entrance and all of that. So I have a little bit of issue with going back with a kind of Victorian porch on an otherwise colonial revitalized building, where the previous design of reintroducing the balustrade that clearly happened at that same time made sense to me. That being said, I would also love to have a front porch. And Ann was just looking at a house across the street that got a colonial revival front porch that is pretty similar to what is proposed. So I guess I'm not totally opposed to it, but I think that's one consideration we should look at, is creating this kind of in-between blending of things that's going on. But otherwise, we're not trying to recreate the previous shed roof porch, so the hip, I guess, kind of jives with the hipped roof on the other side. Anyway, that was just one thought that I had that I wanted to share, but I don't know that it sways me one way or another.
I think what's difficult is that this discovery was made, so I was at the original hearing. I think that this discovery was made after they were well under construction and materials are bought. And so, I think that I agree, like, if some of this had been known maybe at the beginning, there could have been maybe a stylistic allegiance to a singular period. But now it's going to be a little, now you're kind of backing into the solution.
But have materials for the porch been purchased, or, because the shingles all jive with it going back as a circa 1900 colonial revival.
I think what Commissioner Powell's point is that the shingles and everything are underway, which is likely dating to when the colonial revival was kind of input. So if you're in essence going back to the Victorian porch,
Right.
In an ideal situation, you'd go back to the Victorian ornament and siding and everything like that. So, I agree that was my major concern, is kind of creating this in-between wonkiness.
Right.
That said, I do acknowledge that we've learned this information kind of in pieces and parts as it goes on, and so there are previous approvals in place, and there are plenty of examples in the neighborhood of similar porches to what's proposed. So, I think those are all considerations, but I guess I want to make it maybe clear for the record that ideally, you would be making a more holistic, stylistic determination and choice, but this is kind of a special situation of information being uncovered after prior approvals for certain things. So we can't go backwards and say, oh no, don't
Just to
do all that.
clarify, my suggestion is not to restore it to its Victorian appearance. My suggestion is
To make it more
make it a
revival.
colonial revival house, which is what the previous approval was for our well-documented balustrade out front. So I think we could make it a very convincing early 20th century look, but we're adding kind of a fairy tale porch on that didn't exist in the Victorian period and didn't exist in the
But
colonial
it's gonna
revival
have
period.
it's gonna have the same columns as the 1920s work.
Right, but
So-
there were no columns in there was no porch there.
No, but I'm saying that they're pulling in the architectural language of the 1920s
Right.
work and reinforcing it. They're not coming in with a stick-like porch that would be more in keeping with what maybe was there in the Victorian era.
I agree.
So,
But just to add too, like if you look at Exhibit 10, the photo, I don't know if it's up here.
It's-
I mean,
it
both of
looks-
those additions are, you're in a fairy tale land anyways, right?
Yeah.
The side addition.
Yep.
They expose the side shingles, and that obviously is not historically accurate as well. And then, of course, the garage addition.
the two-car garage, yeah.
Yeah, so
No,
I don't know, at this point, you're kind of going like, well.
I mean, I think that in general, this was a very ambitious project. When I saw it the first time, I was really impressed by the level of ambition on the project, and to see some kind of progress photos and see that it's clearly been undertaken in a thoughtful way. While it may not be, the purest of pure, it is a high-quality project and adding value to the neighborhood. And clearly, the neighborhood's been evolving since the 1860s. It's a dynamic situation, so.
I agree.
And I will say, it is so obvious that the owner really wanted the porch. I think it's a very fortuitous turn of events. So.
Having grown up in a big giant Victorian with a big giant porch, I understand the sentiment.
Any other comments by commissioners? Ed, if you could, can you take us to the recommendation page? So before we render a decision, we have staff recommendations to approval of the porch design and incorporation of the historic portico for 6108 Maywood Avenue, Mount Washington Historic District. If there are not any other comments, I would like to put a motion on the floor for recommendations from staff approval of the porch design and incorporating of the historic portico.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Everybody, it was unanimous.
Yes.
Go right ahead. Okay, commissioners, thank you. Next, we have Sarah Ann Historic District Designation. Gotcha. And the request is determination if the historic district designation is ready for formal consideration by CHAP. The applicant is the Great Poppleton Neighborhood Association, and the staff is Stacy Montgomery.
Good afternoon, everyone. So today we have a second hearing of the Sarah Ann Street Historic District Designation Hearing 1, a determination, I think we just went through this, but a determination if the district is ready for formal consideration by the commission. All right, so first let's get into some background on why this is before us today. Some recent background, which is full of some good news. So back in April 12th of 2022, the CHAP Commission heard Historic District Designation Hearing 1, which only included a grouping of houses on Sarah Ann Street. There was substantial testimony, both written, we have received over 160 letters of written testimony, and in-person testimony as well, asking the commission to please expand the boundaries of the district to include 319 to 321 North Carrollton Street. In May, anticipating another hearing, the commission received 60 more letters of support for the designation. And then as CHAP awaited scheduling another hearing, there was news from the Mayor Scott, who announced that 319 to 321 North Carrollton Street would be returned to the ED family and not sold to the development team as it was initially planned. And at the same time, the mayor also announced that the houses on Sarah Ann Street would be sold to Black women built to be rehabbed. So that was exciting news and brought us back to holding another hearing about the designation today. With expanded boundaries, as you see here, that include both the row houses on Sarah Ann Street and the houses on North Carrollton Street. And I want to point out, as we look at maps versus some aerial photographs, a lot of the maps show outlines of houses that do not exist anymore. So as you see on maps, you may see some houses not in the district, but outside the district that appear to exist that do not now. That's just important to understand as we go through. There's been some substantial demolition over time here.
Wait, so Stacy, are you saying the map is the correct one? as
No, I'm
opposed
saying
to
the aerial photographs are more up to date.
Okay, thank
You will not see some of the houses that are outlined in gray. Oh, thanks, we'll give this.
Okay.
And that's sort of part of the reason why this district is really important, is because there has just been years and years and years of loss of historic fabric. So just, you may see like, oh, there's a bunch of houses here, and you're not going to see them when we go to the aerial photographs. So why is this what is this district? A little description. And just this map here, before I go into the summary description, everything that's outlined in blue has a historic designation. So there's National Register districts and local districts. And you can see this area that is not where the historic district is, the red outline. There's no historic designations in that whole area. Anything that's not blue has no historic designation, no historic protections. That's important. The little boxes are landmarks, yes. All right, so situated near the northwest corner of the Poppleton neighborhood, the proposed Sarah Ann Street Historic District includes a block of 11 alley houses on the north side of the 1100 block of Sarah Ann Street, and 2 row houses on the east side of the 300 block of North Carrollton Street. The Poppleton neighborhood is bounded by West Mulberry Street to the north, West Baltimore Street to the south, Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard to the east, and North Carey Street to the west. The southeast side of the neighborhood is densely packed with residential, commercial, and medical facilities, and the northwest portion of the neighborhood has some remaining churches, and really in this area where the designation is one of the larger groupings of remaining row houses. So here we see an aerial, this is from a distance, showing more of the neighborhood. And then we're closing in. So you can see where on the map there are more houses where there are not today. This is an aerial view of the proposed district. And here we are on Sarah Ann Street. So we'll talk about Sarah Ann Street first, and then we'll talk about Carrollton Street. Sarah Ann Street was historically known as Harmony Street, and it's home to a row of intact alley houses. There are 10 two-story row houses that are 2 bays wide and 2 rooms deep. And the house at 1102 Sarah Ann Street is 3 stories high. They were built in 1870 as a row of 12 row houses. They have slanting flat roofs with the then popular Italianate style row house, kind of a simplified version of that form with simple wooden cornices, parts of which are covered with tar paper right now, that kind of imitate a more high-end, what you might find on a 3-story major street Italianate row house. The alley houses, they have simple flat wood doors and wood lintels, and they may have originally had 2/2 sash windows, but right now most of the windows that exist are 1/1s. Each doorway has a narrow transom that was probably originally built with 2 lights, which is, you can see today at 1110 Sarah Ann Street. So we'll just kind of go through, these are the Sarah Ann Street houses here. You can see the 1 3-story building. Just some up close images. This is the backs of the houses, very small housing. Okay, and then we have the North Carrollton Street houses. This is 319 to 321 North Carrollton Street. And these are three-story brick row houses with simple dentiled cornices and a tall painted stone base. They did originally have wood cornices, which were removed sometime between 1950 and 1970. There's been some alterations on 321 North Carrollton Street, that the windows have been shortened slightly versus 319 are full height windows with that stone sill and a transom. And the houses are bookended with concrete walls, because this was part initially of a row of 8 row houses that spanned from Mulberry Street down to Sarah Ann Street. These are the last 2 remaining of those row houses. So here we see 321 North Carrollton Street. And again, Sarah Ann Street. All right, so let's talk about the significance of these properties. I mentioned before that there's been substantial demolition, and so first we're going to look at just a few maps before I start talking about the history. This is an 1876 map of the area of the block. You can see Sarah Ann Street, the district is again outlined in red. You can see that block is substantially developed. Here we are in 1885. Again, the block is completely developed in 1885. And if we think about it back to that arrow we saw earlier, most of that is not there today. Okay. So we're starting to touch on the significance of this district. So let's talk about it. It's situated in the northwest corner of the Poppleton neighborhood. It's a group of houses that demonstrate distinctive characteristics of the construction of the 1870s. The Sarah Ann Street alley houses represent an increasingly rare building type in Baltimore and in older East Coast cities. Alley houses represent a small-scale house type built on narrow, small streets that parallel or bisected wider streets with middle-class houses. Alley houses provided housing for Baltimore's working-class residents. They are simplified versions of larger row houses ornamented with various architectural styles. Today, the majority of the alley houses built in Baltimore and in other East Coast cities have been demolished, making Sarah Ann Street a rare survivor in Baltimore and on the East Coast. Alley houses are integral to understanding the historic fabric of Baltimore's row house neighborhoods, helping to define the intimate human scale of the 19th century city. And in the Poppleton neighborhood, these houses are the sole survivors of that is an intact group of alley houses. The properties within the proposed district also provide significant representation of the underdocumented history of Black homeownership and residency in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The houses on North Carrollton Street, constructed also in the early 1870s, have been in African American ownership since 1928. The Sarah Ann Street alley houses, built in the same time period, provided affordable housing for African Americans and other groups, other working class residents during the period right after the Civil War. Together, this grouping of historic homes offers an important resource on African American history in Baltimore City, specifically in West Baltimore. So, here we have an 1890 Sanborn map. Again, we can see this block is fully built out. There's alley houses on both sides of Harmony Street, which is now Sarah Ann Street. Carrollton Street is lined with row houses. This side of North Carrollton Street, I should point out that the other side of North Carrollton Street has no houses on it at this point in 1890. So this whole block is built out in 1890, sorry. And again, not much change. There's now housing on, we don't have the other side of Carrollton Street here, and I apologize, it's a different map. But again, this is what it looked like into 1951, all built out. Here we have a photo from the Poppleton Historic Study of 1975 of Sarah Ann Street. You can see the 1 3-story house and the other row houses here. So how do we evaluate historic districts? The criteria for evaluation, we look at the quality of Baltimore's history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, and culture is present in district sites, buildings, public interiors, structures, and objects that possess integrity of location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association, and that are associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of Baltimore history, or that are associated with the lives of persons significant in Baltimore's past, that embody the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, method of construction, etc. So it's a very long one, or that have yielded or may yield important information in Baltimore's history or prehistory. So the staff analysis of the initial research onto this district is that the Sarah Ann Street, the proposed Sarah Ann Street Historic District, is eligible for local historic district designation under criteria for evaluation 1 and 3. One, that the proposed Sarah Ann Street Historic District is significant because it represents the housing and home ownership of African Americans over a period from 1870 to 1970, and that it represents unique African American resources. And under criterion 3, that it is significant for representing an intact example of alley houses in Baltimore City, a rare surviving intact row of alley houses. So another piece of this review process for hearing 1 is looking at the outreach. And in the staff report, in the written staff report, we outlined a lot of outreach that happened, a lot of back and forth that's occurred since 2007. But let's talk about the more recent history when this ball got rolling in 2021. So the Southwest Partnership Historic Preservation Committee, Poppleton Now Neighborhood Association, Councilman Bullock and Dr. Nicole King had a walkthrough of Poppleton with Eric Holcomb to discuss historic designation. The formal request was made for historic district designation in summer, about a year ago, in 2021. And there were several small meetings that occurred in the neighborhood that Eric and Councilman Bullock were a part of to discuss the designation process. And then let's say, okay, so in September of 2021 is when the neighborhood formally requested historic district designation. In part of our process in November of 2021, we sent a letter to all of the owners of the properties, inviting them to participate in a survey where they can learn more about designation and vote about if they're in favor or not. And all the responses came back favorable. That being said, there's one homeowner, which is Housing and Community Development, but they came back favorably. And then on January 3rd, CHAP received a letter of support from the Southwest Partnership. In April, again, in anticipation of the first version of this hearing, CHAP received over 150 letters of support for the designation of the historic district. And the majority of those letters asked that the commission include the North Carrollton Street properties in the designation. So why are we bringing this back with a bigger boundary? What is the boundary and why are we coming back with this larger boundary? The boundary of the proposed historic district includes 2 houses in their lots on North Carrollton Street, 319 to 321, and 1102 to 1124 Sarah Ann Street. It includes 13 intact houses and 2 lots where demolition occurred more than 20 years ago. The district will include intact alley houses and as well as homes that represent in total a history of African American home ownership in Baltimore City. So these resources meet, in CHAP's staff's opinion, criteria 1 and 3 of CHAP's designation criteria. And so the designation would conform with the requirements of the local government certification, which all of our districts have to meet under the National Preservation Act and the Secretary of the Interior standards for identification and registration. So the staff analysis and the recommendation. So in accordance with CHAP rules and regulations regarding designations and landmarks, staff, particularly the executive director, worked with Poppleton Now Neighborhood Association, Sarah Ann Street stakeholders, Baltimore HCD, who has been the primary property owner, and CHAP staff applied the criteria for evaluation, the Secretary of the Interior standards for identification and registration, and confirmed the proposed designation meets the requirements of local government certification under the National Historic Preservation Act. Therefore, staff recommends approval because the Sarah Ann Street proposed local historic district meets CHAP criteria for evaluation 1 and 3. The proposed boundaries are supported by a finding of fact. The outreach to the property owners and property owner responses are sufficient. And further, we request that the commission requests that the staff prepare a full and proper study with findings of fact for presentation at designation hearing 2, which is where the commission would make a formal motion about district designation. Any questions? Sure.
So this question just kind of popped in my head as you were talking, and I don't think anyone looking at this property would think it should be anything but designated. I just have a question on kind of how the boundary was determined, just since I wasn't involved early in the project. Looking at the aerial that you had up and then, cruising around on the Google Google Maps, you know, Street View, there are, like, there's one on the south side of the street, and then there's like one on Arlington. Were there some intentional decisions about not including those?
I'm gonna ask Eric about that because I was not initially involved in the,
I'm just wondering, because they, you know, especially the one across Sarah Ann looks similar.
It looks similar. That one is in incredibly bad shape, and in fact, we've asked HCD building inspectors to go out and look at it because of its
Okay.
bowing and cracked front facade.
All right, so it's really
Could
a
be
matter
dangerous,
of,
actually.
it's pretty dangerous, and just the condition of it isn't salvageable, really.
And can you go back to one of those aerials? Because I think some of those are already demolished.
yeah, and again, those areas
Yeah,
are.
and that's what I was trying to remember back versus what you can see here.
Yeah, and I mean, the aerials are, and I think I have the date, if you give me a minute, a date in my staff report, but, hold on.
Okay, yeah, so the one on North Arlington is already gone. Okay, and then the one across the street on Sarah Ann is practically gone. Okay, and was there any discussion about, I understand the unique identity for this tiny, tiny district. Was there any discussion about anything on Saratoga or surrounding blocks or on a community level, just people who are involved with that?
I'm sorry, I've had conversations with the Southwest Partnership Historic Preservation Committee as community groups in that area. And we definitely want, or they definitely want to pursue more historic preservation activities. But at this time, we wanted to, and the community wants to move forward with this local designation, especially since HCD and the legal department, the law department worked so hard of getting their deal done that we can get these buildings to Black women build and really moving forward. But we may be coming back into a couple of years from now with either expanded boundaries or other local historic districts. We, on course, we expand local historic districts all the time. Mount Vernon Place has been expanded at least 7 times, Bolton Hill at least 3 times, Seton Hill 3 times, so you could just keep on. So there is that tradition of expanding boundaries.
Okay, thank you. Last totally random question, which is, would this be the city's smallest district? That's just a curiosity question.
Thank you, Chairman.
No.
The Loft District is down to just one building, and I think Pearlman Place is now several buildings. Is there any other really small ones? Sterling Street's pretty small, but this could be the second smallest, I think.
I was just curious. I'm all for it. I was just.
Yeah, and I think there's some districts that have small pieces, like Butcher's Hill.
Commissioner Battle?
Yeah, I had one question, and this is just from a development perspective. And it's, if you've ever just driven down there, you feel the history. There's something special about this block. Just for the initial designation, does it make sense to even protect across the street? I mean, you have this one area that's protected, and essentially you're kind of leaving whatever's across the street open for anything.
We didn't pursue or analyze moving the boundaries south. And I don't know how HCD would feel. I don't know if that was part, I don't know what the boundaries or the deal is with the master plan of that area. So that was something we would have to pursue.
Wait, sorry.
Go ahead. No, please.
I was just saying, also, there, as I showed previously, there's no historic designation in this area right now. So providing some designation to the existing structures also opens up that opportunity for the folks who are rehabbing those properties to access historic tax credits, which isn't currently available. So it would open that opportunity up now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably all in favor of that, but I understand where Commissioner Battle was coming from, because now all of a sudden, if you can have a development across the street, you know, you want it to be in line with the context for the alley houses. You don't want them to be overshadowed by some monstrosity. So I agree that some level of protection in the neighborhood is better than none for sure, but maybe that is something, you know, next year or so could be evaluated.
Commissioner Capalia.
I was just gonna note that, it might be there's a global investigation with all the district lines, because there's many times where a district line ends on a street. So like, you have a row house that's in the district, row houses that are not. They look very similar, but then these guys are in the district, these others are not. And it seems like that line wants to fall not in the middle of the street, but actually in the, in the alley to capture a full street. I don't know if I'm sure you guys talked about it. I think you talked about it before, but I didn't know if that was a global, maybe a note to look at that.
And I think now, when we revised our ordinance, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, that's the reason we do the findings of fact and the boundary justification that wasn't, I don't know, always historically part of the process, that now we're trying to create somewhat cohesive, thoughtful boundaries.
So there are no more questions for Stacy. What I would like to do is give the floor to Commissioner Kate Edwards, because I know there's been some updates, and of course, Stacy gave us a lot of history dating pretty much back to 2020 all the way up till now about the status of that area and development. So, Commissioner Edwards, if you would.
Sure, yeah, I was going to give a little update on the amendment that went through. Some of the highlights were already mentioned in the staff report. But on July 20th, the Board of Estimates approved the Fifth Amendment to the Poppleton Land Development and Disposition Agreement. And several of the top priorities of DHCD and Mayor Scott were addressed in that amendment. And we have been negotiating this since November of 2021. So this was a long time in the making. And from that time, our top priorities were, first of all, the Sarah Ann row houses needed to stay in place where they are. That was already under the LDDA, but we wanted to reaffirm that. And we then also definitely wanted to remove 319 and 321 North Carrollton. And so we achieved both of those things, and then we're also able to get the Sarah Ann row houses assigned to Black Women Build, which will ensure that they will get renovated much sooner on a quicker timeline, and also have affordable homeownership opportunities for those properties. So all of these were really high priorities for us, and we were just glad that we were able to get that through. We also got the designation of the next project that La Cité, who's the developer there, will be working on, and that will be 231 North Schroeder Street. And that will be approximately 200 units of senior housing. We also talked with the developer about making sure that for the remainder of the development area, there'll be a lot more home ownership rather than large structures of rental multifamily. So there'll be a mixture of both, but we're making sure that having and including home ownership opportunities is a high priority in the development. So, it was just really great to get to that milestone and be able to have this hearing today. DHCD was always supportive of the Sarah Ann row houses being designated, and we just wanted to make sure that we achieved what we needed to with 319 and 321 to have those removed from the LDDA prior to going ahead and doing the historic designation for those two. So thank you for giving us that.
Outstanding. No, you're more than welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. At this portion, we do have people who have signed in to speak on the Sarah Ann Street Historic District. We have a couple names. I'm going to mention their names, and please come up to the podium, say your full name, and as we said before, you have 2 to 4 minutes to speak. The first name that I'd like to have come up is Johns Hopkins.
Thank you, Commissioners. Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, here to support the district. nomination. When I was a young director 15 years ago, I got a phone call from a board member, Tom Ward, Judge Ward, saying, John, you got to get over here. I have somebody who I would like you to meet, who is sitting over here. There's going to be widespread demolition proposed for the Poppleton neighborhood on Sarah Ann and Carrollton Street, and there are some unbelievable historic buildings that need to be saved. Judge Ward, incidentally, was the person in 1965 who created you all. He was a city council member then and wrote the ordinance. Some things have changed over the past 15 years that this proposal has been out there. A lot of demolition has happened. What Judge Ward said was happening was what he called the sword of Damocles hanging over the heads of the Poppleton residents. I call it a fog of uncertainty. Who would want to buy a house when you don't know what's happening in your neighborhood? Who would want to invest in a business if you have no idea what's going on? Who would even want to be a new renter if you have only question marks ahead of you? So I am here to both reinforce what a big deal it is to get to this point today. I can't add to the excellent research that's gone on with Mary Ellen Hayward 15 years ago, Dean Krimmel 2 years ago, Dr. Nicole King a year ago, Stacy Montgomery today, but I can emphasize that in addition to meeting CHAP's criteria, moving forward with this proposal will lift that fog and give these folks who have been fighting for so long a chance to actually move forward with their neighborhood. So I understand the dilemma with looking at boundaries, but I will just urge you that this has been a long slog, and a forward movement, concrete movement today with the boundaries you have would be an exceptional service to all of us in Baltimore City. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list, Dr. Nicole King.
Hello, I'm Nicole King. I'm a professor of American Studies at UMBC, and I've been working for the past couple of years with Sonia Eady, with Scott Pasnow in the Historic Preservation Committee in Southwest Baltimore. And just to address the boundary issue before I say my prepared remarks, residents are interested in expanding this. I completely agree with Johns and Eric that we need to do this because people have been waiting decades. So, the Boss Kelly home, which I know George Ward was just torn down 2 days after our Save Our Block rally last July 21st, 2021. So we're trying to think about other ways to expand this, but we need this to move forward today so this wonderful development that Black Women Build and Shelley Halstead can get underway and the Edys can get underway on work on their home. But I just wanted to briefly, say a few things. I, of course, support the local historic district and the boundaries that are listed here today. I testified in detail about the history back in April. You can watch that. I have it written out here. I won't go into it because I will get gabbled. But I just really want to say that on August 11th, 2021, when we first gathered at Sarah Ann Street Park in the rain, the pouring down rain and the heat, people still showed up. And one of those people was Eric Holcomb, who has showed up and who has walked with us and supported us. And that is really important. He will answer questions that the Eady family had, and that is really important. And I commend CHAP for that, though we have not always been copacetic. Second thing, August 22nd, 2021, we had about 50 people out there and presented the history, which I could talk about. I have these lovely zines my students made. I'm happy to give any of the commissioners one. But Dr. John Bullock was there and stood with residents and publicly supported this. So before, Miss Eady was on the cover of the newspaper, people stood with us, and that should be remembered. And I just want to thank, all of those who did that. It was really important. Johns Hopkins, as he said, with Judge Ward since 2004. Miss Eady has been in this fight with people supporting her. And I want to acknowledge that the residents, the community organizers, the housing justice lawyers, and everyday people who wrote letters support this fight. They showed up and they supported, and it says that you can get stuff done, even if it might be slow and take many years. So at the press conference on July 18th, where we heard this good news that Kate Edwards went over, city officials said we can't go back and change the past, and we must look towards the future. And this is absolutely true on a certain level. And Poppleton residents have been waiting nearly 2 decades and deserve community-led and equitable development and preservation in their neighborhood today, right now, absolutely. But as a cultural historian, I study the past. I hang out there, I live there a lot. And to build a better and more equitable future in the city, we must not only study and preserve the past, we must reckon with it, with our past in the city of racist redlining, highway construction, and misguided redevelopment plans in Black neighborhoods. We must also do the difficult work to repair it. And this is just the start of that process. Change is hard. I always tell my students, if you want to understand something, try and change it, because that's how you understand it. And, I also want to, in conclusion, say, Dr. Bullock, we want to work with you to develop ways to change how development is done in the city, how LDDA agreements are approved, how they affect people in Black neighborhoods. So we're looking forward to doing that, because this is just the beginning. So thank you. And if you want a zine, just let me know, because they're really, really beautiful. All right, thanks.
I definitely would like one. Thank you, ma'am.
I do, they're in my backpack.
Next, we have on our list Sally Halstead from blackwomanbuild.org.
Hi, my name is Shelley Halstead, and I am the founder and executive director of Black Women Build Baltimore, which is a home ownership and wealth building initiative that trains Black women in carpentry, electrical, and plumbing. And we do that by restoring vacant and deteriorated houses in West Baltimore. I'm also a general contractor at my MHIC, so it's very convenient to be doing this work. And when I first heard about Poppleton, Sarah Ann Street, and the Edie's, I emailed kind of anybody I could email and say, Black Women Build will rehab these houses. If we can get through CHAP, we will rehab these houses. And so it sounds like we're getting through CHAP designation and the boundary issues. And so we're just ready to begin. I'm super excited, and I'm just like, go. So that's it. And we do CHAP. We try to do CHAP with every house that we rehab so far in Upton and Druid Heights. So we're looking forward to doing that on Sarah Ann Street as well. That's it.
Thank you so much. I can pronounce the first name. If I pronounce the last name wrong, forgive me. Scott. I'll let you say it right up on the on the podium. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Yep. Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
My name is Scott Cashnow. I'm here today to support the Poppleton Community Association, Poppleton Now, with their request to create a historic district for Black home ownership in Old Poppleton. I'm a resident of the Franklin Square neighborhood. I live about 3 blocks from the corner of Sarah Ann Street and Carrollton Avenue. I'm also very involved in my neighborhood, and among other roles, I serve as the chair of the Historic Preservation Committee for the Southwest Partnership. For the past several years, the Historic Preservation Committee of the Southwest Partnership has worked along with researchers, professionals, professors, and community members to document and preserve the Poppleton neighborhood and the story of the residents that have lived there. Now, historically, we have not valued Black neighborhoods in the same way that we valued white neighborhoods. We do not preserve Black history in the same way that we preserve white history. And today we have an opportunity to change that. In front of us, we have an opportunity to take a step towards remedying structural racism that has defined our city for the past 100 years, maybe longer. It's only a small step, but it's one that we can take today. And I hope you'll take the step and create the district. And I'm fully in support of the CHAP creating the historic district for Black home ownership in Old Poppleton, and I hope you will be too.
So Scott, thank you, sir. And finally on our list, we have Sonia Edie.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Chair. It's good to be here. I would just like to first start off to say, hearing some of the questions that was asked, I appreciate those questions because they were a lot of the same questions that we were asking as residents of Poppleton, not understanding why our neighborhood was being destroyed. And there was a separation gap of our boundaries that had once extended from Marbury Street to Pratt Street. They put a dividing line at Baltimore Street, and all the preservation was on the southern side, which was a predominantly white neighborhood, and all of the destruction happened to fall on the northern side, which was a predominantly black neighborhood. So to witness this, happening, it was for me, it was just something that I just could not conceive. And when Judge Ward knocked on my door after hearing me as a hearing that I had attended, when he knocked on my door and just, it felt like this help has come. My neighborhood was going to be preserved, that there was going to be a fight to preserve my neighborhood. So when you're looking at these maps today, when you saw what was there and now what's gone, you don't know how it makes me feel. Because in my fight was that everything be preserved. The 300 block of Carlton Avenue, both sides. That was the most beautiful block in all of northern Poppleton. The eastern side was 3-story, and the western side was 2 stories. But the architecture of these properties was amazing, and so I just, to see my side of the block just demolished last year, it was heartbreaking to see this happen. And so I just want to now just say this. Today, this is a testament that we as a black people exist, that our history will be preserved and recognized instead of erased. That black families did have a contribution in the economic growth of Baltimore City through real estate. That our investments in our home ownership, landlordship, and community longevity need to be celebrated the same as white communities. That not only does black people's lives matter, but also that our black neighborhoods matter. Preserving this part of Poppleton's history sets the precedence that Baltimore City should take throughout all of the black neighborhoods within the boundaries of its city, to protect the legacy of black people and our contributions to the city. So you today, you have that power to make this legacy all possible. Thank you all.
Thank you. And for the record, Ms. Edie, if that's possible, could you leave us a copy of your speech, if that's possible? Thank you. So that will conclude our public testimony. We're going to go to the screen, and commissioners, I promise, I'm going to try to make this paragraph short. If I don't beat me up. So before we make any motion on the floor, are there any questions, anything any of the commissioners like to share?
Mr. Chair, I haven't been a part of the long struggle that has culminated in our hearing today. But it calls to mind a question around our process. And so I'm not sure if this is the appropriate place to lodge that, and I'm sure you will guide me in that. Given the long struggle that this neighborhood has had as an African-American neighborhood to partake of the benefits of historic preservation, my question is, how do we, as a commission, make the decisions about historic neighborhoods? Is it always, I mean, this is 13 houses coming from this community, and so I wonder if it takes this type of effort for a community to preserve 13 houses, what implication does that have for how our role in making that happen in particular neighborhoods, African American as opposed to traditionally white neighborhoods. And perhaps it's my newness to our process. And again, maybe this is lodged at a better, place, but it's just that this example is so stark to me as being a newbie on the commission.
Well, Commissioner Warren, I think you raised a great point. I was contemplating just the time. It looks like it's almost 3 years it took for this to happen, to come to fruition. I think moving forward, as a group, we can collectively find a way to make our process one that is not so extensive. And the criteria that we have, maybe if there's a way that working with our executive director and the staff, how we set precedents that it doesn't take too long for not community groups, but just other organizations as well. Doesn't take this long for this to happen. So I think that's a conversation we have to have amongst each other as a group to just really figure out the best practices, because you raised some good points. There were some amazing questions that were raised. That's why I asked Ms. Edie if she could let us keep that letter for the record, because I think as a commission, we have to show that not only did we make changes and make opportunities for communities, but there were folks in that time period that cared about community. It just wasn't us. There was some community engagement and involvement. So I think you're 100% right. We as a group, and as we all know, we're going to go through some things as a group to strengthen us. And make no mistake, for those who are here, I'm new to the commission as well. So Dr. Rothwell is also speaking for me as well. What do we do as a new commission group to make changes? So thank you for that. I also want to give opportunity for any other commissioners to share any thoughts, and I want to publicly also thank Commissioner Edwards for the work that you've put into this as well. And Eric, I want to thank you for what you do. And of course, Councilman Bullock, seriously, I know you walking and you talking, so I appreciate you. Commissioner Good, you had a question?
I wanted to echo just the same thing, and even being so closely involved in historic preservation for so many years, it never ceases to astound me how long it takes to get a district established, and when it happens like this, where the community is so 100% behind it, we've been having conversations as a commissioner exactly around that. How do we do that? How do we make preservation more equitable and more accessible for all people all across our city? And so I do think that's important, and that's some of the perspective that folks like yourself and others on the board bring from the community development aspect that I think are going to be really critical for our future. And I just wanted to voice too, as a newbie to the board, I really appreciate the history and the hard work of just everyone who has been in this for the long haul. It's a long journey. I, along with my other fellow new commissioners, get to come in and do the let's go part. Haven't had to do the slog part. So thank you for that. And I also want to thank Johns for doing a 5-minute history on these alley houses, because that was actually the first intro I had on this piece of history. So that was kind of my first exposure. So I really appreciate that, just because I think sometimes we don't hear about these little kind of pockets in the neighborhood that are so important to that local neighborhood. And so also considering how we can educate people on Baltimore's history, just really at a micro level in its neighborhoods, I think would be a great discussion too.
That's amazing. Any other commissioners who'd like to add?
Yeah, also,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a big proponent of partnerships, and given that this LDA was executed in 2007 and we're at 2022 coming up with a designation, I think just given that we're all under Baltimore City, just probably more conversations and more coordination between DHCD and planning when creating the LDAs within communities, especially communities of color, and just really kind of just taking another step and really exploring the history and how development impacts that particular community. I think that's something as a commission we can change, and really we're all under the mayor, we're all under in the same house. But I think as a commission, that's something that we should really look at working towards.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, Dr. Rodwell, looks like you've given us something to look forward to as far as a commission, how do we really center our thinking, center our process as it relates to communities, and I appreciate for that. So for the record, let it be known that Dr. Rodwell brought something to light that's important to us as a commission. You're welcome, sir. So, as I promised, I'm gonna try to do it small, but since this is so important, I think I'm gonna go ahead and read the whole thing. So commissioners, we have a recommendation on the floor, and the recommendation reads as, staff recommends approval because Sarah Ann Street Proposal Local Historic District meets CHAP criteria for elevation 1 and 3. The proposed boundaries are supported by findings of fact and outreach to property owners, and property owner responses are sufficient. Request that staff prepare a full and proper study with findings of fact for preparation as designation hearing 2. With that said, I'd like to make a motion for that recommendation.
I second.
Got a moment first.
You can't make a motion.
I can't make a motion, that's right. Yeah, thank you. I told you we still new. Doctor, go right ahead.
He did it.
You moved it? Okay.
Jill seconded.
Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Last on our agenda, we have 513 Old Orchard Road, 10 Hills Historic District. The request is to install solar panels on front portion of the roof. The applicant is Michael. Michael, forgive me for pronouncing your last name wrong. Weinrich, and the staff is Ms. Lauren.
Oh, I don't like these terms, so you can.
Thank you, Chairman.
Whenever you're ready, Lauren. Take your time.
Thank you. So a little bit of background first about 10 Hills. In 1909, developer Charles Steffi laid out 10 Hills, keeping the natural and picturesque ambiance intact. With curving streets, diverse mature vegetation, wonderful vistas, and a diverse array of suburban architecture, 10 Hills exemplifies a picturesque suburban neighborhood. Lining the streets are houses built between 1910 to the 1990s. This is the boundaries of the district, and you can see the subject property. Here's just another image of it showing the property boundaries, and you can sort of see, the curvilinear streets very much in the style of Frederick Law Olmsted. And these are just a few representative examples of some of the homes in the neighborhood. The first houses built in the 1910s tend to be the largest, ranging in styles of colonial, English Tudor, Spanish colonial, Greek revival, and arts and crafts. By the 1920s, the houses tend to be smaller, bungalows, 4 squares, cottages. And after World War II, houses were built on the remaining undeveloped lots in mid-century modern, colonial revival, split level, etc. So this diverse sort of array of houses, I like to call it an architectural petting zoo. You have one of everything. I mean that in like the most generous way. It's wonderful because you do. I mean, it's usually, neighborhoods are very sort of monostylistic, and this neighborhood is not. It's really rich. This is an aerial view of the subject property from the south, so you can see the south side elevation. And this is the facade. So this property at 513 Old Orchard Road is an occupied lot with a detached two-story single-family home that's set back from the street approximately 50 feet. 6 bays wide, the shingle-clad house has a front porch that spans the width of the house and extends beyond it on both the north and south elevations. The house has a hipped roof clad with light gray asphalt shingles flanked by tall chimneys on either end of the house, and there's a large mature tree in the rear yard next to the house. This is a view of the front and the side elevation down a little bit down the street, and it's the front and this side elevation that are proposed for being the locations of the solar panels. CHAP staff has approved several exterior projects on this property since district designation in 2001, including replacement of the asphalt shingle roofing in 2008 and in 2020, and replacement of casement windows with aluminum clad wood casement windows on the sun porch in 2019, reissued in 2020. So a couple projects. The applicant proposes to install flush mount solar panels on the front, which is the west, and side, the south, portions of the hipped roof visible from the street. This aerial image shows the proposed locations of the solar panels, and staff applied CHAP design guidelines 1.14.1 solar panels, which state the following. That in most cases do not install solar panels where they can be easily seen from the street. And this proposal does not fully meet the design guidelines, as these solar panels will be easily seen from the street. However, this proposal does meet the guidelines in that it will not damage or remove historic features, as the shingles on the roof are non-historic asphalt shingles. CHAP staff, given that our guidelines say not to do this, I'm going to talk a little bit about some considerations that staff made in this review. CHAP staff does regularly approve solar panels on flat or low sloped roofs and in applications in suburban contexts that are not highly visible from the street, as per our guidelines. But staff is taking additional facts into consideration for this application regarding local policy, site-specific considerations, and product considerations. The first consideration is the city's climate goals and policies. The City of Baltimore has energy and greenhouse gas reduction goals highlighted in the city's 2019 sustainability plan. And key strategies and actions in the plan's energy chapter are to speed the path to decarbonize through increased deployment of renewable energy and increase the supply of clean, renewable electricity and battery storage, including rooftop solar. There's also the citywide carbon neutrality goal codified in City Council Bill 21-0075R Resolution Global Warming Solutions Carbon Neutral City. Through the passage of this resolution in January 2020, the Mayor's Office and Office of Sustainability set a citywide goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045, with a 30% and 60% reduction in emissions by 2025 and 2030, respectively. Decreasing carbon emissions is critical to stemming the worst impacts of climate change. And the most recent climate change mitigation report by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, released in April 2022, determined that in order to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, greenhouse gas emissions must peak before 2025 at the latest. The upper limit of 1.5 degrees centigrade is a tipping point for irreversible damages to many of Earth's natural systems and is the goal set by the 2015 Paris Agreement. According to the Baltimore Office of Sustainability, the energy used to power buildings in the city, our residential, commercial, and industrial buildings, account for 70% of our city's greenhouse emissions. The wider adoption of solar technology, including on private homes, is one way to help meet the city's carbon neutrality goals. So federal historic policy is usually something, federal historic preservation policy is usually something we look to if we don't have guidelines at the local level. But federal policy has not yet been updated to consider mitigation measures for climate change in regards to alternative energy solutions. So generally, local preservation commissions are nimbler at updating guidelines to meet the specific needs of the communities that they serve. I was recently reading some selections out of this book, Preservation, Sustainability, and Equity, and this quote really, I think, addresses what we're considering today. Dr. Erica Avrami, professor of historic preservation at Columbia University, directs those working in preservation to take on this critical work, stating that the adaptive strategies and green transformation required to confront the climate crisis are inextricably entwined with questions of equity, and preservation action is not detached from those dynamics. At its core, historic preservation should be about instrumentalizing heritage, broadly defined, to sustain communities and promote resilience. Staff is also taking the site into consideration. This property does not have sufficient solar capacity on the rear of the house due to the orientation of the house and tree canopy. The only portions of the roof that have sufficient solar capacity are the front, that is the west, and south elevations, as shown on this Google Project Sunroof map. Thank you, Internet. The solar panels on the south elevation will which you can see here, will not be highly visible from the street. It'll be visible, but not highly so. But the solar panels on the front elevation will be. This installation will not impact historic features as the roofing shingles on this property are asphalt installed in 2020. The third aspect that staff is taking into consideration is the product. The proposed solar panel product has a low profile mounting frame and will be installed flush with the roof, which will minimize the visual impact. Solar panel installations are easily reversible with no permanent alteration to the roof itself. This is an example of the proposed product on a barn, but you can see that it has a very low profile. One concern, however, is that the solar panels are black and the underlying roof shingles at 513 Old Orchard Road, as well as in this example, are gray. And so the solar panels will stand out against the lighter shingles, which is demonstrated in this image. So I did a little bit of research and found that there are some products that can help address this issue. One option to address this visual impact could be to require the applicant to use a graphic coating called a solar skin on the solar panel that looks like the underlying roofing shingle, which would decrease the visual impact a bit. And just one minor thing, and I realize that drawing, sometimes these things aren't accurate, but, certainly making sure that the panels are actually centered on the portions of the roof that they're being placed on would also sort of help decrease the visual impact. There were a number of neighborhood comments. The 10 Hills Architectural Review Committee was provided the plans, and they submitted a letter to the commission, which is on the WIC site. And in it, they state that they recognize the growing climate crisis and generally support projects geared to increasing sustainability, including solar panel installations on more visible roof elevations in 10 Hills. They expect to receive more solar panel applications in the future and understand that not all houses are oriented in a way that will allow for installation on less visible elevations. However, they are concerned that one-off approval of a project of this type will set a problematic precedent and believe that establishing appropriate parameters in advance of approval is key to reducing confusion and frustration for homeowners in the future by providing objective criteria and clear and actionable guidance applicable to all similar projects. They respectfully request that, prior to approval of this project, CHAP first develop and adopt appropriate guidance addressing solar panel installations on street-facing elevations to ensure that approvals of such installations are consistent, equitable, and compatible with the characteristics of our historic districts. The applicant surveyed the neighbors on his block, the 500 block of Old Orchard Road, as well as some neighbors on other blocks in the neighborhood, and submitted the petition that is up on the WIC site. A petition of support signed by 21 neighbors representing 18 households. And just before the hearing, we received a letter of support from Councilmember Burnett, providing support for this application and urging the commission to update the CHAP guidelines to support a sustainable future. Staff recommends approval of this solar panel installation because solar panels cannot be installed elsewhere on the property. The installation is reversible. The project addresses the city's carbon neutrality and energy goals. The approval is subject to conditions that the solar panels are centered on their respective portions of the roof and utilize a solar skin that visually replicates the underlying roof shingles. Thank you, commissioners. Any questions?
Commissioners, any questions?
I have a question. You mentioned the solar skins. From the research you did, is that something that could be done with any solar panel? Just because
that's
they
my
submitted some
understanding.
product information and I didn't see that as an option. So I didn't know if that's something that's readily available or if it would be creating a burden.
There are, my understanding is that there are companies that offer this, and it's a product that has to be applied, like the installer has to work with this company to develop.
So
to do the
it's
solar skin.
separate from
It's separate from,
any
not
the
every,
solar
yeah,
panel.
not every solar company offers that as an option. That's a relatively new development that addresses sort of these concerns.
Okay, was there any discussion about, and I'm blanking on numbers off the top of my head, but the Secretary standards that talk about, you know, a material being the record of its own time, in which case, you know, a solar panel is a contemporary material. And I'm just curious, kind of with the skin and how that was come about. Has that been done on other properties in Baltimore?
No, that's a very new technology. I know that in Washington, D.C., preservation guidelines on solar panels on highly visible elevations, which the applicant had directed us towards, and I read through, they require that on some of the highly visible elevations if the underlying roof material is not also dark. So,
Okay.
you know, so I haven't personally vetted it, but you know, in the research that I've done, it seems like a reasonable request.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions, Commissioners? For long?
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. So our recommendation that we have on the floor, staff recommends approval of this solar panel installation because solar panels cannot be installed elsewhere on the property. The installation is reversible, and the project addresses the city's carbon neutral and energy goals. The approval is subject to the conditions that solar panels are centered on the respective portions of the roof and utilize a solar skin that visually replicates the underlying roof shingles.
Is there no one signed in for testimony?
There is no one signed in.
Yes,
Oh, yeah?
I gave it to you.
You did?
Sorry.
Where is it?
Right, yep,
Where's
it's right
that?
here.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we have Michael Winrich. Come right up. Michael, did I pronounce your last name right?
Weinrich was close enough.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Yes, I'm Michael Weinrich, and I live on the property with my wife, Mary Stewart.
Yes, sir.
And thank you very much for hearing our application today. As you've seen from Congressman Burnett's letter, the City Council does have considerable interest in promoting solar power throughout the city. And we believe that it's important for CHAP to develop some demonstrations and to expeditiously find ways to improve solar roofs in historic neighborhoods, which represent a considerable portion of the city's housing stock. You've received signatures from our neighbors supporting this project, and Mr. Holcomb has received a letter from our community association president in support. And I think that we have to have values that reflect historic preservation, but also reflect our preservation. And we need to move forward on improving our energy self-sufficiency. If you drive around our neighborhood, you will see some Priuses parked in the driveways, and you will see an occasional Tesla, but you will not see a single Model T. So you can have a historic neighborhood with modern features. With respect to the solar skins, they are not a deal breaker for us, but they do add about 10% to the direct cost of the project, and then they decrease the efficiency of the panels by somewhere between 2 and 8%. So overall, increasing the cost of a project by about 15%. If we're concerned with equity throughout the city, I think we want to be careful not to impose additional costs on homeowners for whom installation of solar panels may be beneficial, but for whom it may be something of a financial stretch. Lastly, I think that CHAP does have an important role to play in helping homeowners find responsible contractors to put on solar panels, because there are a lot of people out there who are not particularly responsible. And secondly, making sure that the plans proposed do follow the architectural outlines of the roof and don't obscure historic features. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Mary Stewart?
Thank you very much. Is that, yeah, I'm in the mic.
And go over in your name. Go right ahead.
Oh, I'm Mary Stewart. I'm Michael's wife. And I have been the owner of 513 Old Orchard for over 30 years. And I come to you with a historic context of my own, which is my daughter was about 7 when we bought that house. And this morning, I have my granddaughter from California, who's 7, the daughter of that daughter, with me. And she's going home tomorrow. And she said, "Grandmother, do you think when I grow up, I could live in your house?" Oh, well, yes, that would be wonderful. But in the back of my mind, 30 years is right up there with the tipping point for global warming. And so I desperately want an environment and a neighborhood that's hospitable for my daughter and my granddaughter. I don't want us to be dinosaurs or them to be dinosaurs. I may not be around. And so listening to the discussion of Poppleton, I thought, something, this is with today, really feels like a historic moment for me. You began reading the mission that integrating our city's past and future was among the charges to CHAP. And I feel like hearing people speak to this issue of Poppleton and us coming up behind Poppleton and saying, this is a really urgent matter, because each of us, I mean, I have hope. We wouldn't be putting this thing, I wouldn't have agreed with my husband that this was a good idea if I didn't have hope that each of us can make a difference if we step forward and we don't drag our feet too long and worry about it too much. And if we do what we can, and this seems like something we can do. And I tell you that, Lauren, we've worked with CHAP for these many years, and Bob O'Hacknick, who's with us here today, was the head of the CHAP committee, and he's an architect, so he worked with us, and Lauren worked with us, and it's more than just those 2 items she named. We had to replace our chimneys. I mean, it goes on and on. But CHAP worked with us, and Bob worked with us, and it didn't take us 25 years. And so as I stand here listening, I can feel my heart beating hard and thinking, this group and this staff, if they work with the neighborhoods in Baltimore City the way they've worked with me on my roof and my chimneys and my windows, we can make a big difference. We may be able to tip that tipping point so that our children and our grandchildren have a sustainable future. But we can't wait too long to do it. And so, having said what's really in my heart, I want to say something about the solar skins. Michael is a very strong advocate in our couple for us doing this. For me, it's a lot of money we're talking about putting out to do this, and I am very skeptical when it comes to being a pioneer on really new technology, especially when it's on technology that I don't completely understand anyway. And so one of his selling points was, look, these panels have been around a long time. They're straightforward. There's a lot of experience with them. You know, new technology is coming down the line all the time, and there are going to be things that, you know, are more compatible with you know, the roofing, but this is something that we know that it works, and you're not going to have problems with it. You know, okay, I can handle this, you know, the money, it's for the future, the technology, it's got a track record. I'm there with you. When I see the solar skins, I feel a little more shaky. And so, Lauren, I really appreciate the homework that CHAP staff did to find the solar skins. But myself, I like the idea of lining them up so they're centered. Great, you know. I don't mind the way the barn looks. You know, it's a gray roof, it's dark shingles, you know, they work. Good, more power to them. So with that, I leave those of you who are the experts to, you know, work with us, and Godspeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next on our list, we have Robert. And Robert, forgive me if I...
Just like it sounds.
All right. Your last name, I'll let you get up and speak.
Hi. Yeah, Bob O'Hatnick. I am a longtime resident of Ten Hills, going back to 1972. We've lived in our house since 1974. That's one of my hats. The other hat is that I was one of the founding partners of GWWO Architects here in the city. I've been retired for about 13 years now, but I still see the staff and have good collegial relationships with the folks. And the other hat I'm wearing is that Mike, Mary, and my wife and I have dinner about 2 or 3 times a month. So we're longtime friends. So if we can balance those, the aspects of why I'm here. Mostly why I'm here is that Ten Hills got historic designation in 2001. Is that correct? I was the first liaison between CHAP and the community. I retired from that position about 2 years ago. I have seen a lot of stuff happen in the neighborhood. I do believe that with the help of CHAP and some discussions, that the neighborhood is maintaining its character and its strength. I also look at this as an architect and understand that the future's coming. Panels are going to be here. Michael and Mary just happen to be the first ones that you're encountering. They're going to come. It could have happened somewhere else. It could have happened in another neighborhood. When I look at what Mike and Mary are proposing as an architect, I'm seeing that works. That could be, it's not destroying the neighborhood. It's not destroying the house. It's reversible. I think for CHAP, for the commission here, there's an area that is fraught with peril, and that is unless you take a serious look at each one of these, there could be guidelines that allow some unhappy developments with regard to solar panels. And you're all aware of that. And that is your mission, to develop guidelines that sort of guide the process rather than say, you can do this or you can do that. Because as we've learned in my neighborhood, we've got over 20 styles of housing. So what happens to be architecturally and historically correct on this house is not historically correct on this house. And I think we're going to encounter the same kinds of situation with the solar panels. Some you'll never see, and some are going to be right there. So I want to thank you for your time.
Robert, thank you, sir. Before we go into making a decision, are there any conversation that any of the commissioners like to have before we go?
I wanted to bring up a couple points just.
Oh, well, okay, Catherine, give me one second. I forgot. You had your hand up.
Yes.
Oh, we're going to break protocol a little bit. I'll allow you to come up and speak. Come on.
Oh,
Come
thank
on.
you. I asked
And she said we're allowed to, if we're not on the list, to raise our hand to have a comment.
I just want to.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, but make sure
My
that you
name's
give your
Kathy
full name.
Oh, thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. My name's Kathy Lundstedt. I just moved from California and I bought a property in Fells Point that's currently under construction. And I have a permit pending with the CHAP and city right now. And I've been here since February. One of my first calls was to try and add solar panels because in California, everybody has them. And I would say my experience with trying to find out what the rules are and find a contractor that could help me understand, I pretty much found nobody that was even willing to talk to me because the contractor said they don't even want to deal with that the historic area because of CHAP. And my concern, probably I have a van and I've learned how to use a portable solar panels and a battery pack to survive in a van. We had a power outage with the storm the other day, and I would say at a minimum to be able to allow homeowners in the historic areas to have some sort of solar panel battery backup system that they could use. And I have an idea, my thought, after trying to find the service in my own home and being unsuccessful, if we could come up with some sort of committee or group that could try and understand how important solar is and a pathway to be able to allow solar, even if it's for emergency uses only. And the Biden administration is just passing all kinds of legislation with solar panels, so I think the timing is perfect for that. And I am more than willing to dedicate my time to that committee to help, if there is such a thing, that we could start to try and address the topic citywide. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Okay, commissioners, any comments?
Now is appropriate?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Spikes or Chairperson. What do we call you anyway? I don't know. Okay. So I think in general, again, for those out listening, a majority of us are new commissioners, and one of the things that we are looking at is what is the future of historic preservation in our city, and looking at things like equity, sustainability. So I guess I just want to reassure from some of the comments you guys brought up today that they are items that as a commission we're thinking about. And how do you do this with historic preservation has long been difficult. And, point of history, Dr. Rodwell and I, he brought up earlier, we were involved in a very long-term project, but a historic building that achieved LEED Gold. It was a lot of hard work to get there, but we recognized the importance of that, and it also opened up more financing options as well. So I think in general, we're all fans of sustainability. The question really is, how do you incorporate that with historic properties? So I also appreciate the local ARC, bringing in the fact that more guidance is needed for historic properties, and specifically in solar panels. And we were kind of talking a little bit about that before we launched into an official meeting. So I guess one of my questions would be for you, Eric, which is how do we go about, kind of as a separate from this project specifically, how do we go about as a commission, I guess, directing staff to investigate how we can create more guidelines for this type of situation?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I think the staff is very interested in doing some analysis and actually revisions of some portions of our guideline, and that would include our solar panel section, and also to expand it to be more lenient and to take in sort of the realities of the present day. So I think the recommendation would be something like this. If you all felt like you wanted to move forward with looking at sustainability tools in historic districts, ask the executive director and his staff to go out there and to do research and create sort of a position paper, and then maybe recommendations of revisions, and then bring that back to you in 2-3 months. And I'm looking at Lauren with the timeline, because I think it might be more than 3 months from now.
Well, and that's kind of my other question is, thinking about it in terms of our children and grandchildren, not just solar panels, but other types of sustainability, and how can we more easily incorporate that for our historic structures, and some guidance there. So I think that's important. The other point I just wanted to make, and other commissioners might feel differently, while the idea of a solar skin helps to mitigate the kind of, I don't know, eyesore difference, the shock of the difference between the black panels and the roof. To me, I think back to, I'm sorry, I don't remember the new sustainability director's name. That was Ava. Okay, so Ava made an interesting point before our meeting, which is, we're all used to telephone poles and power lines, which didn't used to be around, and then everybody had to get used to them. And she sees a future where everybody just gets used to seeing solar panels everywhere. So I think that was interesting, how it was brought up. Everyone has them in California. So personally for me, having a solar skin, it still is what it is. I don't know that that necessarily improves the situation. You still can see that there's solar panels. You still see the grids and outlines. To me, looking at the historic character of a building, putting a skin on it that's printed to look like shingles doesn't really gain you anything. It's still a solar panel. That's my personal opinion. I don't know if other commissioners feel differently.
Any other commissioners who would like to share any comments?
If no one else has anything to say, I would make a motion with some edits.
All right. Well, we have, and let's be clear that this is for 513 Old Orchard Road, 10 Hills District, and the request is to install solar panels on front portion of the roof. Am I correct? So that is what we're making the motion on. Who would like to make that motion?
I actually just asked you.
I'm just making sure. I just want to make sure, because we have that on the screen, but the actual.
Yeah, so we're going to edit it.
Yeah, 513 Old Orchard Road. Okay.
So I would recommend that we approve the solar panel installation because the roof is not historic fabric, because it's not. That's an important distinction. It cannot be installed elsewhere on the property. The installation is reversible, and then the remainder, the original sentence, which is the project addresses the city's carbon neutrality and energy goals. And then I would strike the last sentence. The approval is subject to the conditions of the solar panels being centered on the respective portions of the roof, period.
Can you, I got to the point where you said can't be installed elsewhere. And then
the installation is reversible.
Okay, install is reversible.
Comma, and then it's the rest of the recommendation on the screen, right? Except striking. Yeah, striking utilizing solar skin.
Gotcha.
So it's basically just noting that it is an asphalt shingle roof in the first place and not requiring the solar skins.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second that. Thank you for those additions. Sure.
All in favor?
Aye.
There we go. You're welcome.
Just a note, the staff approves solar panels and looking at them all the time. It really only comes to us when it's, a front-facing facade. So it is important to us. Do we want to, before we adjourn, do we need to do anything or for recommending the staff look at sustainability stuff?
We can talk about it on Friday. I have another piece of business before everybody leaves.
Right, I'll go through the,
Okay, good. What we have to do, what we want to talk about is, like we said before, giving the staff the opportunity to give us recommendations on solar panels, the new technology information, whatever comes in the future, just as you mentioned, Eric, with probably recommendations or a paper so that we all know what position we can be in moving forward to deal with solar panels. So we'll
And
give that.
beyond solar panels, I
Beyond,
think just
right.
sustainability.
Right,
for-
so we want to make that as a note because we need to, for criteria in the future. Let's get in, do we have any old business, before we adjourn, do we have any old business we'd like to discuss? Okay. Do we have any new business? Go right ahead.
So this is in regards to city IDs. I'm going to forward an email around to everyone. Everybody's been scheduled for a photo for your city ID. And if you can't make the photo, it'll tell you, I'll provide all the information, but just be on the lookout. I'm going to send it out after the hearing for an email where everybody's scheduled to come in and get your picture taken. So practice your smile and we'll, except if you're already a city employee, there's a few folks already have city IDs, but if you don't have one already, I'll send that around. Everybody's scheduled for next Monday. So if that's going to be an issue, I'll give you the information to contact. It's a very strange. I think they only do photos on Mondays.
Okay. Any questions on that, on the photos? Okay, good. Do we have any other business? Okay, the time now is 2:59, 4 seconds left till 3 o'clock. This meeting is adjourned.